Welcome to the quarantine kitchen. For today's episode, we'll be making scones. Scones were originally a British pastry that they served during tea. However, like most things, Americans bastardized the scone and we serve them with breakfast. I remember the first time I made scones. It was in Mrs. Godlinski's 8th grade home economics class, and they were terrible. Today we'll be making savory vegan scones. Specifically, sun-dried tomato and thyme scones. For this recipe, you'll need all-purpose flour, sugar, vegan butter, salt, baking soda, nutritional yeast, almond milk, vegan mozzarella cheese, sun-dried tomatoes, chickpeas, or garbanzo beans. If you are wondering what the difference is, there isn't one. Thyme. You can use dry thyme, but I highly recommend using fresh. This thyme was given to us yesterday by our good friends who grew it themselves. Let's get started. First, in a mixing bowl, mix together your flour, sugar, salt, and baking soda. Soda or powder? Correction. The recipe calls for baking powder, not baking soda. Using the paddle attachment of your stand mixer, gently mix the dry ingredients together. As they're mixing, take your butter, which should have been in the freezer for at least half an hour. Slice the butter into small cubes and add them as it mixes. Your mixture should look like very coarse crumbs. If you're anything like me, you probably got dry ingredients all over your counter. If you didn't, what's it like to be special? In a separate bowl, add the almond milk. Next, take your can of chickpeas and drain the liquid. This liquid is called aquaphor, and for reasons science can't explain, it acts as an egg white substitute for vegans. Add the aquaphor to the almond milk and whisk thoroughly. You don't need the actual chickpea, so feel free to set these aside for a different recipe. You can do the same for the remaining aquaphor. Once the mixture is frothy, slowly add it to the dry ingredients. The mixture should now be moist. The mixture should now be wet and sticky. In yet another bowl, add the remaining ingredients. For the sun-dried tomatoes, it's important to drain all the excess oil and pat off as much as you can with paper towels before chopping them up. For the vegan mozzarella, I recommend using a brand like Daiya. It comes pre-shredded and doesn't taste like ass. In addition to thyme, I'm also going to add some fresh sage because our friends also gave us fresh sage. Mix the ingredients so everything is well coated in nutritional yeast. Remove any excess dough from the paddle attachment, then remove the paddle attachment and attach the bread hook. Add the remaining ingredients to the bowl. Mix with the bread hook, but only for enough time to thoroughly mix in all the ingredients. Now it's time for the fun part. First, you'll need to liberally flour your counter surface. You'll also want to liberally flour your own hands. Knead the dough lightly until it's mostly covered with flour. Next, you'll need to roll it out as flat as possible. Unfortunately, I don't have any wine bottles today to use as a rolling pin. On the bright side, I now own an actual rolling pin. Next, you'll want to cut the dough into smaller pieces to bake. I like using a pizza cutter to cut up this dough, not only because it's very easy, but also because these scones smell like pizza and it reminds them of their Italian roots. Let's move on. These may be the ugliest scones I've ever made. Before they go into the oven, they need to spend at least half an hour in the freezer. If freezer space is tight, I recommend making these during the cold weather months so you can just stick them outside. It's time to put the scones in the oven. The scones need to bake for 20 minutes at 400 degrees Fahrenheit. They smell amazing and only very slightly burnt. These are still the ugliest scones I've ever made, but I'm looking forward to trying them once they cool off. They look vaguely like undercooked chicken breasts. Let's give it a try. They're very tasty. And like all scones, they're very dry. They like turn to glue immediately. That's all for this episode of the Quarantine Kitchen. Join us next time, or hopefully don't.